I didn't find out my parents sold my house because they told me. I found out because a stranger knocked on my door, holding a folder, and asked when I'd be finished moving out. I laughed. I thought he had the wrong address. Then he handed me the purchase agreement. My parents' signatures were all over it. Mine wasn't. Because the house wasn't theirs to sell. My name was still on the deed. That knock didn't destroy my family. It just exposed what had been quietly breaking for years. Stay until the end, because the part they never expected me to find was a letter my grandfather left behind, years before any of this happened. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34, and until last spring, I thought my family had the kind of problems every family has. Nothing dramatic. Nothing worth walking away from. Just small disappointments I kept telling myself didn't mean anything. I worked as a commercial real estate analyst in Columbus, Ohio. I liked numbers. I liked contracts. Paper rarely lied the way people did. That lesson would end up saving me. I lived alone in a 2-story colonial house my grandfather had helped me buy 8 years earlier. People assumed he'd left me money. He hadn't. Grandpa Walter spent 43 years doing city maintenance work. He wasn't rich. He was careful. When I graduated college with more determination than savings, he handed me a small notebook, years of handwritten records. I've been putting away a little for you since the day you were born. It covered the down payment. The rest came from my own overtime, my own skipped vacations, my own homemade soup dinners. That house was every sacrifice I'd ever made. Which apparently made it something everyone else felt entitled to. My parents lived 20 minutes away. Dad had retired early after a shoulder injury. Mom filled her days at church, managing everyone's lives but her own. Then there was my younger brother, Ethan, 3 years younger, more charming than responsible. If he made a mistake, someone fixed it. If he borrowed money, repayment became optional. If he quit a job, it was never his fault. I used to tell myself every family has one child who needs more help. My parents said it so often it became background noise. Claire, you're stronger. Claire, you understand. Claire, your brother's trying. Nobody ever asked why the dependable one always paid the price for being dependable. 3 months before everything happened, Ethan showed up at my door on a Tuesday, looking exhausted. I messed up. He'd invested nearly all his savings into a friend's restaurant. It closed in 6 months. He owed almost $80,000, and neither of our parents knew. I didn't know who else to tell, he said. That sentence hit harder than I expected. He'd come to me. Not them. Me. We went through his finances for 3 hours. Credit cards, personal loans, medical debt, a mortgage falling behind. I told him he needed a bankruptcy attorney. He looked ashamed, but he hugged me longer than usual before he left. Thanks for listening. For a few days, I actually thought maybe he was growing up. Looking back now, I wonder if he already suspected what our parents were planning, or if he was just as blind to it as I was. 2 weeks later, Mom invited everyone for Sunday dinner. Same as always, roast chicken, too many side dishes, Dad asleep in his recliner before dessert. Except this time, something felt off. Mom kept watching Ethan. Dad barely spoke. Conversations paused half a second too long whenever I walked into a room. After dinner, Mom asked me to help with the dishes. She waited until the water was running. You've always been responsible, she said. I've heard. Ethan's having a difficult season. He told me. Her eyebrows lifted. He did? Families help each other, she went on. And sometimes helping isn't fair. Something in me tightened. I guess. I just hope you'll remember that. At the time, I thought she was asking for patience. Now I know she was asking for permission. She just never said it out loud. Spring came. My tomatoes went in along the fence, the way Grandpa taught me. Work got busy. Life felt normal. Then one Friday, a voicemail from an unknown number. Ms. Bennett, this is Karen from Franklin County Title Services. We need clarification regarding a property transaction involving your address. Please call at your earliest convenience. I assumed it was a scam and deleted it. The same message came again the following Monday, this time with more urgency. I still ignored it. If I'd answered, maybe everything would have gone differently. Or maybe it just would have hurt sooner. A week later, working from home, my doorbell rang. A man in his 60s stood on my porch with a leather portfolio. Claire Bennett? Yes? David Mercer. I believe we're scheduled for the final walkthrough. I'm sorry? The house. He glanced past me. I figured you'd already finished packing. I actually laughed. I think you have the wrong address. His smile disappeared. He opened the portfolio and handed me the first page. My address. The purchase price. The closing date. My parents' names listed as sellers. My brain refused to process it for several long seconds. Then I looked for one signature. Mine. It wasn't there. What is this? I heard myself whisper. Mr. Mercer's confusion turned to alarm fast. Are you telling me you didn't know about this? My parents' signatures were on the agreement. My address matched exactly. The sale price, $318,000. Closing date, the following Friday. But my signature was missing. I've never seen these papers before, I told him. I think I'd better call my attorney, he said. So should I? He left me a photocopy and drove off, glancing back twice. I stood in my driveway a long time after his car disappeared. The maple tree Grandpa and I had planted the first spring I owned this house was rustling above me. 8 years. 8 birthdays. Every memory suddenly felt breakable. Inside, I spread the photocopy across my kitchen table and read it twice. The buyers had already put down earnest money. A title company had opened escrow. Someone had spent weeks arranging this. Weeks. And no one told me. I called my mother first. She answered on the second ring. A man just came to my house asking when I'd be moving out, I said. Silence. Not confusion, silence. Did you try to sell my house? I can explain. That wasn't a denial. Your father and I were trying to help Ethan, she finally said. By selling my house? It wasn't supposed to hurt you. You've always landed on your feet. There it is, I said. The thing you've said my whole life. Dad called 20 minutes later. You embarrassed your mother, he opened with. You tried to sell property that isn't legally yours, I said. We were going to tell you. This weekend. The closing is next week. We didn't want you worrying. We're family, he said, when I pushed back. We helped you buy it. Grandpa helped me, I said. I paid every mortgage payment. We all sacrificed. No, I said slowly. I sacrificed. He ended the call with 4 words I'll never forget, you've changed. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd finally stopped pretending. I barely slept. At 3 in the morning, I opened the cedar chest Grandpa had given me, folders for insurance, taxes, mortgage statements, the closing documents from 8 years ago. He used to say paperwork was just another kind of family history. If you keep records, people can't rewrite your life. I found the deed. Owner, Claire Bennett. No joint ownership. No trust. Just me. There was no legal version of reality where my parents could sell this house without me. So how had it gotten this far? The next morning I called the title company. Karen, the woman from the voicemail, was cautious but let one thing slip. According to the file we received, your parents represented themselves as authorized sellers. Authorized by whom? I can't answer that. You should move quickly. By noon, I was in the office of an attorney named Rachel Donovan. She reviewed everything and gave me the first good news I'd had in 2 days. Your parents can't transfer ownership they don't legally possess. Then came the but. If documents had been signed claiming authority they didn't have, this became much more serious. Fraud level serious. Rachel requested certified county records and started asking questions I hadn't thought to ask myself. Had my parents ever had power of attorney? Had they ever been on the mortgage? Why did they believe they could do this at all? I didn't have an answer. Unless, somewhere along the way, they'd simply made so many decisions for me that they forgot I was an adult. That evening, Ethan showed up unannounced, pale. I heard from Mom, he said. I swear I didn't know. They told me they were refinancing something, helping me consolidate debt. They never said your house. Then, quieter, I thought maybe Grandpa had left them ownership. You never asked? I should have. Before he left, he said, I'll tell the truth. And for the first time in our lives, my brother wasn't asking someone else to clean up his mess. He was preparing to face it himself. That scared me almost as much as what my parents had done. 2 days later, the certified county documents came back, and Rachel called me in immediately. 2 pieces of news. The good one first, the county still listed me as sole owner. Then she slid a second document across the table, a limited authorization form. My printed name at the bottom. A signature above it that looked almost like mine. Almost. I didn't sign this, I said. I didn't think you did. Whoever forged it had copied the general shape of my signature but missed the small habits only I would know, the loop in the second N in Bennett, the slant of the C in Claire. The kind of details Grandpa always said mattered. This document, Rachel said, is the only reason the transaction got as far as it did. A forged signature isn't a misunderstanding. It's a choice. By the end of that day, Rachel had frozen the closing. No money would move. No deed would transfer. Legally, I was safe. Emotionally, I wasn't. That night I drove to my parents' house, not to yell, but to hear them explain it to my face. Mom opened the door before I knocked, looking like she hadn't slept. Dad was already in the living room, TV muted. Neither looked surprised to see me. Your lawyer called, Dad said. So it's official, he added, almost relieved to stop pretending. I set the forged authorization form on the coffee table. Then who signed this? Silence. It was only meant to keep the paperwork moving, Dad finally said. You just admitted it. We weren't stealing from you. We planned to pay you back, as soon as Ethan got on his feet. I almost asked how. Then I remembered his $80,000 in debt. There wasn't going to be extra money. Not for years. Maybe never. Mom reached for my hand. We thought you'd understand after everything settled down. I pulled my hand away. You made plans for my future without inviting me into the conversation. We're your parents. Exactly. Her face crumpled, and she finally said the sentence I'd been braced for my whole life without knowing it. We thought you wouldn't say yes. The room went silent. Not a mistake. Not confusion. They knew I'd refuse, so they simply removed me from the decision. I left without raising my voice. I drove to the park Grandpa used to take me to on Saturday mornings and sat on a bench until the sun went down, replaying 7 words that hurt worse than the forgery ever could. We thought you wouldn't say yes. Because it meant my opinion had never mattered, not really, not to them. The next morning, Rachel called with more. Digging through the title company's records, she'd found an email sent 6 weeks earlier from my father's account, subject line, family property sale, with an attached letter claiming I'd asked my parents to manage the transaction because I was traveling for work. I'd never written a word of it. Stranger still, the document had been drafted using legal software ordinary families don't use. Someone had helped them. By that afternoon, Rachel had a name, a small estate planning attorney across town. He looked horrified before we even sat down. I believed your parents had authority, he said, pulling out his intake file. 2 questions on his questionnaire. Is every legal owner aware of this transaction? Marked yes. Has every owner consented? Marked yes. If I'd known otherwise, he said, I never would have prepared these documents. He handed over everything without hesitation. Walking to the car, Rachel said something that stuck with me. People trying to hide fraud usually avoid creating a paper trail. Your parents created one. They believed, somewhere in the backs of their minds, that what they were doing would eventually be forgiven. A week later, Ethan asked to meet for coffee. He looked different, less defensive, older somehow. I moved out, he said. Got an apartment. Working 2 jobs. Then he pulled an old birthday card from his backpack, one from Grandpa, found while packing. Folded inside was a handwritten note. Not addressed to Ethan. To me. Claire, keep copies of everything. Love doesn't replace paperwork. Good people make bad decisions when fear takes over. Protect yourself without losing your kindness. Grandpa. I almost threw it away, Ethan admitted. But I think Grandpa would have wanted you to have it. For the first time in years, I hugged my little brother, not because everything was fixed, but because for once, he'd chosen honesty over comfort. By month's end, the legal side was resolved. The forged authorization was formally withdrawn. The title company canceled the sale and returned Mr. Mercer's deposit. He even sent me a handwritten apology, though none of it had been his fault. The district attorney reviewed the case and declined criminal charges. No money had ever changed hands, and my parents had cooperated once the truth surfaced. Rachel said mediation was recommended, if I wanted it. Justice doesn't always look like handcuffs. Sometimes it looks like consequences that can't be undone. My mother texted 2 weeks later, can we please have dinner? All of us. I stared at it a long time before locking my phone without replying. Some conversations can't happen until the truth has settled, not just legally, but emotionally. I wasn't there yet. The anger faded into something heavier. Grief. You don't expect to grieve people who are still alive, but I was mourning the parents I thought I'd had, the ones who, in my mind, would never make a decision about my life without asking me first. Maybe those parents never existed at all. A few days later, Ethan showed up with pizza instead of problems. I sold my truck, he said quietly on the back porch. Covered a chunk of my debt. He looked out at the yard. I kept waiting for Mom and Dad to rescue me. They can't. I think that's the first useful lesson I've learned in years. I believed him, not because he sounded convincing, but because his life finally matched his words. 3 weeks after that, I agreed to dinner. Not at my parents' house, neutral ground, a quiet restaurant across town. Dad spoke first. I owe you an apology. We convinced ourselves we were protecting the family. But what we were really protecting was the image we had of ourselves. Mom, through tears, if we admitted Ethan needed to face consequences, we'd have to admit we'd been enabling him for years. So instead, we looked for someone strong enough to carry one more burden. Me. Always me. I thought I was helping, Mom whispered. I believe you believed that, I said. But believing something doesn't make it right. Dad reached into his jacket and set a single key on the table, the spare key to my house. I don't think I should have this anymore. It wasn't about the key. It was the first time in my adult life either of them had acknowledged that my home wasn't an extension of theirs. It was mine. Over the following months, things shifted, not perfectly, but honestly. Mom stopped dropping by unannounced. Dad started calling before asking for favors. Ethan never borrowed money again. Our gatherings got smaller, quieter, less performative, but real. That autumn, I finished restoring Grandpa's old workshop into a home office. On the wall above my desk, I framed his note, "Protect yourself without losing your kindness." Some days it reminded me to hold my boundaries. Other days, not to let bitterness take root where kindness used to live. A few months before Christmas, Rachel called one more time. Closing out my file, she'd found something else, a private letter my grandfather had left with the closing attorney years earlier, never meant to be delivered unless my ownership was ever challenged. It read, "If Claire is reading this, something has gone wrong. I love my family. But love is strongest when it respects another person's independence. This home was never meant to divide anyone. It was meant to give my granddaughter a place where no one could make her feel small. If anyone asks her to give that away out of guilt, they've misunderstood the gift. I hope she forgives when she's ready. I also hope she never confuses forgiveness with surrender." I cried harder than I had at his funeral. Not because he'd predicted the future, because he'd understood people. Fear. Love. Pride. Good intentions. Bad choices. He'd known all of it, all along. The following spring, I planted tomatoes again in the same backyard, along the same fence. I felt different, not stronger because I'd won something, but stronger because I finally understood that protecting myself didn't make me selfish. It made me responsible. One Saturday morning, Mom came by. She didn't let herself in. She knocked. When I opened the door, she was holding 2 small tomato plants. "I wasn't sure if you'd want these." "I do." She waited. "May I come in?" For words she had never once spoken to me before. I stepped aside. Yes. Not because everything was forgotten, because respect had finally replaced assumption. It was a beginning. Not a return to the past. Something new. My parents never became perfect. Neither did I. The house stayed in my name. Ethan rebuilt his life one paycheck at a time. Mom and Dad learned that love without respect becomes control. And I learned that forgiveness doesn't require giving up your boundaries. Some families break all at once. Ours broke quietly, over many years. It healed the same way, quietly, one honest choice at a time. The people who love you can still make deeply harmful choices when fear, guilt, or favoritism cloud their judgment. Real forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Healthy families aren't built on sacrifice alone, they're built on honesty, accountability, and respect for each other's boundaries. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if someone in your life has ever crossed a line like this, I'd love to hear how you handled it.